Well, hi, everyone. We are back. We were here this morning for a good almost 2 hours, Diana and I. And today this evening, we're here with Coach Jen, who is a Canadian. I was just in beautiful Whistler, Canada. It was absolutely beautiful, Jen. I hope you've been there before, but it was so nice. And we are talking about the blame game. So if you could just give a greeting. Hi, T, that you're here. You were here this morning as well. We're so glad you're here. So just give us a shout out that we are connected and live to both YouTube and Facebook. I see someone from YouTube showing up, and we just want to make sure from people from Facebook. Hi, Gail. Glad to see you here. Thank you for telling me that you're here. I'm a little tongue-tied right now. I know I've been talking all day, and all of a sudden my words feel like they're not coming out straight. So thank you for being here. And we're going to talk about the blame game. How many of you know how to play that game? You made me so mad. It's your fault that I did this. How many of you have heard your children or you have played this game? I certainly have. Hi, Joe from Australia. So good to see you. And Melinda and Lorianne, you were here this morning. Appreciate you. And Regina. Hi, Susan. Nancy. Welcome. Welcome. Yeah. How many of you played that blame game? How many of you? Jen, have you ever played it?
No. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm teasing. Of course I have. I mean, I was even thinking about it today as I was making supper, just because I'm in a different time zone than Leslie. So I'm in Eastern right now. And I was getting supper ready and I'm like, seriously, you can't do this. Like my husband's not home right now. And I'm just like about the dishes or about the something. And I mean, I keep it in check, but it's there. It's present and I'm aware and I know what to do with it, but it still hits me.
Yeah, it's very easy to make someone else responsible for our misery, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Or for our happiness, or for our safety, or for our well-being. And so this is what we want to talk about, because perhaps that's happening in your house where your kids or your husband are making you responsible for their life, for their problems, for their well-being, or maybe you're making them responsible for yours. And so how do we discern the difference between loving someone and caring about them, caring for them, and taking responsibility, or sometimes we even think it's taking blame for the way they are, where they are in their life. And so let's unpack that a little bit. How do you see the difference between assuming responsibility for yourself and not taking blame for someone else's misery? Yeah, how do you take responsibility for yourself and not take the blame for everyone else's misery, or do take the blame if you are responsible for something? Yeah. 2 times in one day, such a blessing. Thank you, Janice. You're such a faithful watcher of our Facebook Lives. I think you've been almost every single one of them, so I appreciate you. Coming in from New Jersey is Diane. Thank you. Thank you. And Karen is reminding you this is our public Facebook page, so we just want to warn you that this is all public stuff that you put on here, so we want you to be safe when you talk about whatever you need to talk about. And we just want to make sure that if it's something personal, that you're aware that this is a public Facebook page and people can come on our Facebook page, whoever finds us and wants to look at it. Not that they will, but they could. And we've had times when someone said something about a family member and the mother-in-law happened to see it, and that wasn't fun for her. So we just want you to be careful and do what you need to do to be safe, including just writing general things or writing anonymous things like, hey, my friend has this problem. And that way it's not incriminating anybody in your direct family. Okay. So what does it look like to play the blame game? How many of you played it? What do you do when you play it? Or who plays it with you? Put it in the chat.
Yeah, that's what I want to see. What does that blame game look like? I mean, because when we think of a game, it's like strategic. We're trying to win. Something's going on. Someone wins, someone loses.
Someone's right, someone's wrong.
Exactly.
Someone wins, someone loses. Someone's good, someone's bad. It's always polarizing. So when you play the game, blame game, it's always polarizing. Yeah. So Nancy says, myself in my mind. X is still playing it. Yeah. So talk about how you play that blame game in your mind. Okay. So we've done this chart a lot, and I think it's just going to continue to be something I use. I use this in my own life a lot. So we talk about our internal well-being. So your mind and your heart, even your inside body, who's responsible for that? You are. Okay, nobody else is responsible for what's going on inside of your heart and your mind but you, right? Somebody might aggravate you out here, but you're responsible for this. But you're not always responsible for this, right? I mean, you're not responsible for the rain, or you're not responsible for somebody canceling an appointment, or somebody getting disappointed, or somebody can't find their socks, or all those kind of things, you know. But you're responsible for how you show up. But it's very easy to take the blame and the responsibility for everything out here, right? And so how do you take stewardship of you without having to blame everybody else out here for how you feel or what's going on inside of you? Like, for example, I'll just take an example from my life. So I tend to, or I have in the past, I don't so much anymore, but I've struggled with depression. I've struggled with low self-esteem in my life. And I could blame my mom for abusing me, for the way she raised me, for knocking my teeth out. So I've had a ton of dental problems, all the kinds. I could blame her for that. And it's true. She did cause some of that, right? But who's responsible for my teeth? Me. Who's responsible for my depression? Not who's at fault. I'm not talking about that. Who's responsible to take care of me? Me. Who's responsible for my safety and my mental and emotional health? Me. If I want my teeth to be looking better, who's responsible to get them fixed, even though it's not my fault that she knocked them out? It's mine, right? And so I think this is where maturity comes, when we start to own that even if we've been harmed by someone, if you've been harmed by your husband, if you've been harmed by your parents, if you've been a victim of something and you're dysregulated, you're having some damage, even if you get hit by a bus, it's not your fault that you got hit by a bus unless you weren't looking where you were going.
Yeah.
But it is your responsibility to get better, right? It is your responsibility to get better. The bus driver's not going to help you get better. You're the one who has to get better. Even the doctor can't make you better if you don't do your work, if you don't do the physical therapy, if you don't get up and exercise, if you don't take your medicine, if you don't do what you need to do, you won't get better. What does that sound like for you? What does that sound like for you, that you're responsible for you and you're not responsible for him? You can be responsible to him, to care, to speak the truth in love, to be a good partner, but you're not responsible for his internal any more than you're responsible, you are responsible for your internal. So what does that sound like to you? Does that sound like information you know or you haven't heard before? Because it's very easy to blame. Like, well, it's your fault that I have broken teeth. It's your fault that I struggle with these poor self-esteem issues. It's your fault because you did this to me. But where does that go? Where does that go?
Well, that's the easy part, right, Leslie? I mean, listen, we all deserve to be in victim mode once in a while because it helps us kind of garner sympathy, collect, help that we need, that sort of thing. It's how long do we stay there is the issue, right? So what you're saying is, okay, recognize what's happened to us, and then what am I going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's really important here, because you're right. We could get hit by a bus, but it's our job to get out of the hospital.
All right, Melinda, you said blame game. He rages and says, look what you made me do. So when he says that, when someone says it's your fault, okay, so let's use this example again, because it's really easy to kind of look at. So you said something to him, or you wouldn't do something, like you wouldn't have sex with him, or you didn't find his socks, or you won't help him look for his keys, or you won't co-sign a loan. Whatever it is that he wants you to do, you're saying a big fat no. All right. Or you're just not listening or not doing what he wants. And so he's going to throw a little fit out here, or he's going to hurt you or do something to harm you, but it's your fault. But it's your fault. So let's think about this, because women get sucked into this all the time who are being abused. Is it your fault he acts that way? Are you responsible for how he manages his anger? I'm not saying that you don't get, you might not provoke him. Let's say you crashed up the car, or you did something spent money on the credit card that was way over what you should have agreed to or what you did agree to. And you just bought yourself a, brand new something, and he's mad about that. Right? Let's say you did something that really upset him. How he handles his anger or his disappointment with your no. Who's responsible for how he handles his anger or how you handle yours? Who's responsible for that? What do you think? Who's responsible when you are legitimately provoked, whether it's by your children, by your husband, or he's provoked by you because you didn't do what he wanted? You said no, or you wouldn't cooperate with him, or he didn't like what you said, and he got really mad. Who's responsible for what? What do you think? One of my goals, ladies, is to really help you think about this. Jen and I were just talking about this. It's very important because people who play the blame game will confuse you. Like, oh my gosh, it's my fault because I did crash the car. It's my fault because he didn't get sex for a week, or it's my fault because, I didn't make dinner on time, or whatever it is. All right. So Kathy's saying we are each responsible for our own actions. Melinda says he is. Diane says we are responsible for how we behave. I'm responsible for me. We're responsible for our responses. Okay, you got it.
Well, that's responsibility, right? Is responsibility. And I know that sounds cheesy, but it's true. We have to remember some of these things to kind of snap us out of it when things are happening.
Yeah. So if you say no, whatever, no, I can't come to Christmas, Mom. No, I can't, give you money today, kid. No, I can't help you with this or pick you up here or drive you there. For whatever reason, you say no, and they flip out. Are you responsible for how they handle your no? And people pleasers, I don't want to make them mad. I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want to upset them. Like somehow you're in charge of their emotions. Right?
I want to say right there, Leslie, you just struck a chord, I think, because yes, people, like when you ask, like, how are we going to react to that? People pleasers are going to raise their hand without knowing they're people pleasers. They're like, yeah, that's my responsibility. No, it's not.
And we say that. We said, oh, I made him mad. Oh, I don't want to disappoint him. Oh, I don't want to upset her. How are you saying no in charge of how they handle that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they might get upset. That's how they manage their upsetness. I might get angry with my kids at times, or I might get angry with my husband or my staff or whoever. But how I handle that and manage that is totally my responsibility. Right? So when your husband blames you for how he behaves when he's upset, and maybe he's legitimately upset, you did do something that upset him, right? Or you did say no and it disappointed him. That's life, right? I mean, how many of us always get everything the way we want? Big happy party in life? No. This morning we talked about when life is hard and we don't get what we want. How do we handle that? But if your husband's believing that you're supposed to always do what he wants, that you're supposed to never upset him, how do you live like that? You live on eggshells. You live on eggshells all the time. How many of you are walking on eggshells in your house? God showed me something specific that was going to happen to him in response to his sin. He continued sinning and then blamed me for calling it into existence. Yeah, it's the blame game is very easy. So here's, ladies, what I really want you to hear. People might blame you. I mean, look at the news. Trump blames this person. Biden blames this. I mean, it's very common. Adam blamed Eve. Eve blamed the serpent. This is the game from the beginning of time. Mm-hmm. You're not going to change that. It's are you going to be smart enough not to get sucked into it? Yeah. That you're going to feel guilty or shamed or responsible, like, oh my gosh, it's my fault he acted this way. It's my fault he spent too much. It's my fault he became a drug addict. How many of us have done that as parents? Like, we take responsibility for our kids. It's my fault he didn't get his homework done. It's my fault he didn't, go to college. It's my fault. Somehow I made him do. No, we didn't. Most of us do the best we can as parents. As perfect parents, no. But it's not our fault our kids make bad choices. It's not our fault that our husband makes bad choices. Do we sometimes make mistakes? Of course we do. As do they make mistakes? Yeah, of course they do. But if my kid makes a mistake, and one of my kids, when they were growing up, did a cartwheel on the couch and knocked over a lamp that was one of my favorites and broke it. They made a mistake. How I handle that is my responsibility.
Yeah.
Are we on the same page? They're getting mad and trying to make you responsible is a form of manipulation. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
What if things are not clear on whose fault and responsibility it is? Exactly. Then it becomes confusing and gaslighting. That's why I'm teaching you, and Jen and I are here to help you get clearer so that you're not as easily manipulated. Right? Because if you're thinking your job as a good wife is to be his everything and fulfill him and make him happy, well, then guess what? He's going to have a lot of control over you. Just like if you believe it's his role as your husband to fulfill you and make you happy, nobody can fulfill that role. Nobody can do that. And so then we're always blaming other people for our miserable life.
Mm-hmm. And I can't help but think, Leslie, that whoever we see watching us right now, they know. They know they're on the cusp of something. They already know that they're not to be blamed. They're here to listen to what God's truth is.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's what you're sharing. So thank you.
Yeah. Today I was reading my Bible, so I'm starting, I go through different books, so I'm starting in Genesis. I just decided I wanted to start at the beginning. I've actually read half through the Bible, but not in a row. So I thought, what, the rest of the year I'm going to start in Genesis. But I just closed my devotions this morning, and then I flipped open my Bible, not because I wanted to read anything. I just turned, I was putting it aside. And here's where I turned to Ezekiel 33. And you see that thing where I said responsibility? I thought, oh my gosh, I'm doing a Facebook Live on responsibility tonight. I'm going to read what this says. So this is what it says. Once again, a message came to me from the Lord. Son of man, give your people this message. When I bring an army against a country, the people of that land choose one of their own to be a watchman. When the watchman sees the enemy coming, he sounds the alarm to warn the people. If those who hear the alarm refuse to take action, it is their own fault if they die. That's pretty harsh, but God is saying, You're responsible for your own safety. I gave you the alarm. I warned you. And if you die, it's your own fault. You didn't listen. But how many of us live with someone who might be mentally ill or unstable and says, it's our fault if they kill themselves. It's our fault if they can't cope. It's our fault because we're not catering to what they want. And so they scare the bejeebies out of us by making us feel like it's our fault if they might harm themselves. It's our fault if they can't cope. It's our fault if they do drugs or drink too much or cut themselves. And we start getting anxious over what they may do as if it's our responsibility to make sure they don't do those things. And we then become like nagging and controlling, and then it blows up more because it's not our responsibility. We can warn them, we can tell them, we can care about them. But at the end of the day, we can't manage someone else's life for them, especially someone who's a grown-up, but even our kid. It's hard to manage their life, isn't it? And sooner or later, we have to say hands off. We can warn them, we can direct them, but at the end of the day, they're the one who has to do their homework. And if they don't do it and they get an F, it's not because we were bad. And that's what God is saying in this passage. Don't overfunction and take responsibility for someone's life that's not yours to take. Susan writes, I neglected his needs. I didn't realize I was in depression. He sought out attention elsewhere. He blames me for his actions. So let's look at this, Susan. So if you neglected your husband's needs, what else could he have done? What else could he have done?
Can I just add in there his needs?
Yes.
They're
his needs. So there's a lot of lies in here, but I want to teach you to discern. I want to teach you women to think for yourself. So let's unpack this. So you neglected his needs. True. All right. Does that ever happen in marriages? I imagine it does for lots of reasons. Maybe you're undergoing breast cancer treatment and you're just thinking about surviving. You're not thinking about his sexual needs or his needs right now. Right. So is that your fault that he chooses to have an affair? Let's say you're ill. You were ill with depression. And so what does that tell you? What does that tell you, Susan, that he's blaming you for his choices? Is that the only choice he had? And if his needs didn't get met, so here's a belief. We talked about that this morning, that our beliefs create a reality. Men have a belief, and we've been taught this is true as women, that if a man's sexual needs aren't met, he'll die. Like he will just explode and die.
You know how I feel about that. I'm sorry. I'm like, well, no man has ever died from not having sex.
Right. Yeah. So his needs didn't get met for a while. Yeah. I bet yours needs don't get met for a while too sometimes. That happens in life. Right? So, yes, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
And Susan responds, I wish he would have been there for me.
Yeah. Your needs weren't being met either, were they?
Exactly.
Right? And so this is really important. Yes, we have needs, but I'm going to draw it out again for you. And thankfully, we have people who care about us. You know, we have people in our life, whether they be our spouse or our children or our parents or whatever. And if we say, hey, I have a need, I'm going through some depression, can you pray for me? Or I have a need, for, some money, can you lend me money or whatever? I mean, I think this is part of caring for one another and loving one another and sharing our burdens with one another and carrying one another's burdens. But if I need, I don't know if I'm writing upside down, I can do this, need with a capital N-E-E-D. Something out here.
Hold it up a little higher. Yep.
If I need with a capital N-E-E-D, you to do something out here in the external world. I need you to love me. I need you to understand. I need you to have sex with me. I need you in order for me to be okay. I'm treating you as if you're my God. Like you are my source. You are my source for okayness. And God says only he can be our unconditional source, right? Amen. Only he can be our unconditional source. And if God, he tells us, I will give you everything you need for life and godliness. But if we don't get what we think we need, like sex in the moment, maybe he's trying to teach us something else. Like you won't die if you don't get this today. You'll actually get stronger and learn to love, even if there's nothing in it for you right now. Like maybe your husband could have learned, wow, how do I care for my wife instead of only thinking about me? Maybe he could have matured in that. But because we're so focused on, hey, you have to meet my needs or I will die. And then we blame our spouse for not fulfilling our needs. They become this source that they were never meant to be. They're not your source for everything. They're not your source for your well-being. God is your source. And he may give you a spouse to meet some of your needs some of the time, and they're going to disappoint you a lot of the time. And how do you handle that? You go have an affair because your spouse isn't there for you? I hope not. I hope not. Your husband had an affair because you weren't able to be there for him for whatever reason, and he's saying it's your fault. Is that true? Is that true? No.
It's not true.
It's not true.
It is 100% not true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of you are dealing with this right now.
Yeah.
Gail's is being raised to not disappoint anyone led to a habitual eggshell walking. And I didn't realize I took so much of the blame. It just seemed normal.
Yep.
It just seemed normal. And ladies, I'm preparing a workshop for you next week for all of our followers on if it's not abuse, if he doesn't hit me, is it still abuse? And, the answer isn't always yes, but often it is yes, because abuse isn't about hitting. It really isn't. It's about control.
Mhm.
And so I want to teach you what that looks like in an unhealthy marriage. And sometimes we're in an unhealthy marriage, and it's not the abuser that the only one who's unhealthy. We're unhealthy too, because we're getting manipulated and we're letting it happen because we've been taught from little. And I was too. I grew up in a I didn't grow up, but in high school, I went to a pretty conservative church when I came to know the Lord. And I never bought into the Bill Gothard headship and submission, hierarchy model, all of that kind of stuff. But we're going to be talking about that at the workshop. And I believe in submission. Don't get me wrong. And I believe in authority and all those kind of things. So I'm not a woman's liber kind of thing. I believe in the Bible, but I didn't believe in the hierarchy that he structured, that women were less than men. I don't believe that's what the Bible teaches. But many of our friends did, and many of our families did in growing up. And it's very easy when you fall into that mindset to kind of defer your thinking to the men in your life, your pastor, your father, your husband, because you're not as smart you're not as capable as God has made them to be your authority and your teachers and your leaders. And so you sort of dumb it down. Because if you show you're smart and you're thinking for yourself, you're sort of like, what's wrong with you? You don't know your place, woman, you're taking over. And that can make you feel like, oh, I'm not following God. And so I really want you to attend this webinar next week if that's your issue, if you believe that you might be in a situation where maybe he's not hitting you, but he's using other means, especially scripture, to blame you, to control you, to suck you into being manipulated, into feeling responsible for what he does, just like you were sharing, that I'm responsible for his affair because I couldn't immediately attend to his needs because I had some needs of my own. And he's not feeling any guilt about not attending to your needs, is he? I bet he's not. Like, that's your problem. You were there to respond to which is a very objectified view of women, which often these men who are raised in this kind of mindset have, is that you're there for me. I'm not there for you. You're there to please me. You're there to serve me. You're the wife. You're not a person to love. You're an object. And that's abusive. And I want to talk about that. So if you haven't signed up yet, I'm going to put it in the you'll see it in the feed. If he doesn't hit you, it's still abuse. And beneath that, it's saying the Conquer Workshop. You need to sign up. It's next Thursday. And it's going to be at noon Eastern time, as well as 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. And we're going to unpack all of this. I'm going to give you a workbook that'll have all the Bible verses in there that you need to have. We'll share with you what does it look like for you to start becoming a God-centered woman and not a husband-centered or a man-centered woman. And for you to take responsibility for yourself, to steward your safety, your mental and emotional health, and not be so easily intimidated and manipulated with people who misuse the Bible to control you. And this is crucial. This is so crucial. We live in a time right now where I can't say how important this is because we don't want the next generation of women to grow up believing the same thing. So if you haven't signed up yet, sign up. We really want you to attend because the blame game, just like you're saying, one of their strategies is one of their strategies. Yeah.
I mean, you can't go wrong. You've got to sign up for this. I mean, it's just an amazing opportunity. And Leslie loves on you. Is this where we do a little bit of Q&A as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we'll have an hour for the workshop, and then I'm going to stay and answer your questions. And you're going to have a private space off of Facebook. That's why we need you to sign up so that we have your email to mail you the link for the workshop, because we don't want to do it on this space. It's too important for you to feel any intimidation at all about showing up or not being able to answer your question or ask your question. And so we really want you to have that freedom. We take it off. We put it on a private webinar site that is available to you. And if you can't make it live, I really want you to make it live because the live is very different than just watching the replay, because you can get the chat, you get that interaction from one another. And I think just seeing the chat right now, I mean, Amanda's sharing some personal things, but if you're sharing these things and other people say that happened to me too, that happened to me too, you don't feel so like alone. You don't feel like this is only me, that only my marriage is crazy, or what's wrong with me that I married this crazy guy. You're seeing that 1 in 4 Christian women report being in this kind of controlling, abusive relationship. This is staggering. I mean, think of your church. 1 in 4 women are saying, me too, me too, me too. You are not alone. And The only way I know to heal from this is to be in a community of other women who understand what it's like, that it can support you and help you grow to get healthy yourself, so that you are strong enough to invite your husband to get healthy or set boundaries so that you're not continually manipulated and gaslighted and hurt by what he does or says.
Well, and we are so passionate about so many things, Leslie, here for sure. One of our themes is content, which is what we're kind of doing right now, but Leslie will give during the workshop. But it's also community and connection. And then coaching after that. After that. But I mean, those are some amazing things. And I think that's what God called us to be, because it's part of his church, is to step out of that isolation. So we recognize that a lot of you, so when you, like, that's what prompted me to say this, is that when you talk about that 1 in 4 kind of idea, I'm guessing it's more than that. It's not just you out of the 4. It's also women out of that 4 that you're looking at in church or in your neighborhood or at Walmart or something like that, that are dealing with some sort of manipulation, control, the blame game, like we're here talking about tonight, that makes us doubt ourselves, question ourselves. And so we want to help you step out of that in a godly way and see the truth, for the capital T truth that God calls us to see. So I thank you for this opportunity. This is really good. So sign up.
And how do I learn, to steward myself and also love my husband in the way that God calls me to love him? And it doesn't mean shutting your mouth and enabling his sin to continue to harm you or your kids. That's not love. That's fear. And you might have legitimate fear. I'm not saying someone's holding a gun to my head, I'm going to do what they say, but that's not love, right? I'm compliant out of fear, I'm not ministering. Perfect love casts out fear. When we're in a truly loving relationship with someone, we're not afraid of them, and they shouldn't be afraid of us. And so if you're fearing stepping out of line, saying no, if you're squashing yourself, if you're staying silent in a relationship because you know you have a price to pay if you don't, this is not a godly, healthy marriage, nor is it God's will for you to continue to cooperate as a submissive, godly woman in a oppressive, abusive relationship. Instead, you're called to speak the truth in love. You're called to uncover the unfruitful deeds of darkness and expose it. You're called to encourage one another, lest any one of us become hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. I mean, let's think about it as a mom. If your child was doing something that was harming himself or you, or both, let's say he was stealing money from you to buy drugs, for you to stay silent about that and just submit and enable that or support that subconsciously because you're afraid if you don't, he's going to be mad. Are you loving that child, or are you actually contributing to their harm to themselves and to you? Right? But this is what Christian women have been sort of taught to do, is actually enable sin and call that a noble sacrifice. It's not. It's craziness. And we're going to talk about that and what the Bible really says to do. So if you're a woman who wants to stay godly, then it's important that you don't listen to what some of the world says about this, because you're going to be tempted to repay evil with evil of your own. You're going to learn to be just as snarky and just as abusive and just as controlling as he is. And that's not God's will for you either. So how do we stand up to oppressors and resist their control over us in a good way? And I'll just give you a hint. We're going to talk about that 1 Peter 3 passage that everybody gets clobbered with if you've been in any pastoral counseling at all. But Peter tells slaves, for example, in that passage, hey, slaves, if your master is harsh and cruel, you be the bigger person. You still do what is right. So when Peter says that, is he actually telling slaves, it is good for you to be a slave? It's okay with God that you're mistreated. Right. He's not saying that at all. But what he's saying to slaves who had absolutely no power in that culture, they were property to be treated as the owner felt justified. God's not endorsing that. He's not saying that's okay. But what he's saying is when that owner strips you of your dignity, when they treat you like property, when they treat you like an object to use. Slave, don't forget who you are. You are an image bearer of the Most High God. Don't forget, you show up as a image bearer because you're working for me, the Heavenly Father. And so even though you are being oppressed, you have choices to make, and make them so that it restores your dignity internally, even if there's nothing you can do externally to get out of that situation right now. But nowhere is God endorsing that kind of behavior or that cultural mindset of slavery. And this is where I think we've gotten really confused sometimes. And 100 years ago, the Southern Baptist Church broke off from the Baptist Church because they said God does endorse slavery. See, it's right here in the Bible. And they're doing the same thing now. God does endorse husbands controlling their wives. See, it's right here in the Bible. Wives, submit to your husband. He's your husband. It doesn't say that. Not that way. So come to the workshop next week, and we're going to unpack that for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Can you answer a couple of questions?
Yeah, let's answer some questions.
Okay. So we've got, what about love covers a multitude of sins?
Love does cover a multitude of sins. It doesn't cover every sin, right? And so there's this idea in the Bible, two different principles that are not contradictory. It's just both and. It's not either or. So love calls us to learn forbearance, which means, hey, accept we're all imperfect, accept that we mess up, and don't keep harping on every little injustice or every little bump in the road. Like, oh, that hurt. Oh, you hurt me right now. Oh, I don't like what you said. I mean, who would like to live with someone who constantly told them everything they did wrong? That would grate on any one of our nerves. So Paul says, hey, when you love someone, you just put up with small things that people do wrong or small things that you don't like. It's not all about you. You don't have to have your way anymore. People are different than you, and let it go. Learn to let things go. And he also says, learn to speak the truth in love. When someone sins against you, Jesus says, go to them and talk to them. Tell them the truth about what they've done to harm you. So it's both and. We have to learn to put up with things and let it roll off our back and not take it so personal. And we have to learn when it really has harmed us. If your brother or sister sins against you, go to them. It's both and. And so love covers a multitude of sins. It doesn't excuse sins. It doesn't enable them to continue. It speaks up and has some boundaries about that. Like, that's not okay with me. Right? So yeah, let the small stuff go. And the big stuff, you have to recognize it causes harm to you, to them.
All right. Thank you for that. That's amazing. So, okay, here's a bit of a question, whatever. How do I reply to my husband when his doctor is agreeing that lack of sex is causing him additional health problems? So there's a blame, if we ever heard one.
Yeah.
And you've touched on this already, but yeah, let's go again. So
I imagine the doctor. So I think a healthy sex life does help you feel better in many different ways. So I'm not negating that it may have some health benefits to have a healthy, loving sex life. But if God is saying, for example, if you're not married, you don't have that outlet. So is he relegating everybody who's not married to poor health because they didn't have a sexual outlet? Is that what God would, because not everybody is married. The Apostle Paul wasn't married. So what did Paul do? Did he have prostitutes on the side? No. So it's not everybody has a healthy sex life. And if your husband really wanted to improve his sex life with you, what is it that you're saying has to change? Maybe you don't want to be an object to use. And so it's not just, his sex life would improve if we had a healthy relationship. And maybe your health would improve if he treated you decent, right? So I think those would be ways to talk about that. Hey, I'm not against having a conversation about our sex life, but do you have any idea why I don't enjoy our sex life, or I don't want to have a personal sexual relationship with you when I feel ignored every other way, that I feel dismissed as a person, and you just want to use my body to have an orgasm? That doesn't feel good for me. And what if you just said that? Like, hey, I do care about your health and I do care about your sex life, but I care about my life too. And I'm not willing to just be a body that you use to have an orgasm. I'm not willing to do that anymore. So if you want to have a real relationship, like God says, that makes a sex life and a sex relationship experience for both of us good and safe, I'm all ears to talk about how we can make our relationship better. But if you just want my body so that you can have an orgasm and you feel better, I'm not doing that anymore. So I think that's where you can say yes and you can say no. Yes, I could work on this if you're willing, and no, I'm not going to be used anymore.
Yeah. Well, again, it goes back to, what am I responsible for? What am I not? I'm not responsible to be your masturbatory vessel.
Right.
I'm responsible.
That's pretty darn clear.
Well,
yeah, really.
I'm here to be your partner. And like, God created sex for so many different reasons than just for his pleasure, right?
Yes.
So
For
I think
your
that's,
pleasure too.
yeah, exactly. It's a
And for
mutual
giving.
partnership. Yeah.
Yes. And if your husband doesn't care about that, it's still all about him and you're there for him.
Mhm.
But what about him being there for you? It goes both ways. You both make promises in your marriage vows to do that. So again, I think this is where not a judgmental or blaming conversation, but if you can get strong enough and healthy enough to be kind, but clear, hey, I do care about this for you, and thank you for telling me. But I have to tell you that I don't think a sex life is just about you. A sex life is about me. It's about our relationship. And we haven't had a relationship for 20 years. Why would I want to have sex with you if I don't even know who you are? And I don't even feel a bit of care from you. Why would I want to do that?
Mhm.
Right?
Those are powerful words. It's very, very true, because I think a lot of some women's upbringing has been, I am just there for him. It's his right. Something like that along those lines. And it's just, that's not true. That's not
Yeah.
how God created sex. Absolutely.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
And I mean, God created the marriage relationship to be a very special relationship. Now, I think we have romanticized it in our culture with Harlequin and Hollywood to be, oh, he's to be my everything. He's not going to be your everything. I'm just going to tell you the truth. He's not going to ever be your everything, and you're never going to be his everything. So
yeah,
get that off the table so that you're not so disappointed, right? It's not going to happen. And you're going to have rough times, and you're going to have misunderstandings, and you're going to have, but if you can be there for each other and talk to each other, God created the marriage relationship to be the safest and most trusting relationship that you could possibly have. Not a perfect relationship, but the safest and most trusting relationship. In Proverbs 31, it says, he trusts her to do him good, not harm, all the days of his life.
of his life.
That's the security of a long-term marriage, so that you can raise children in a safe environment where they learn good relational skills, so that they can move out in their life and have good marriages and families too, so that we can be fruitful and multiply and raise healthy children. So it's not about just his needs. It's not just about him fulfilling you. It's about, how do we create safety and trust for both of us? And it's pretty hard to have sex and intimacy with someone you don't feel safe with and you don't trust. You can have sex with anybody, but you can't have intimacy with anybody.
Yeah. So what do we do? I mean, this is a global question, but what do we do when our husbands blame us and say, you're the reason, like, our marriage is awful, or you won't have sex with me? And it's like this coercive type of thing when it comes to and call it sex. Maybe it's like, you don't clean the house well enough, or take care of the children. You didn't pick them up quickly enough, something like that. I mean, how do we deal with that kind of blame? Right? Because it still feels like oppressive and coercive. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I might just say something like, wow, it sounds like you expect me to be the perfect wife. It sounds like you expect me to do everything that you want all of the time at your bidding when you want it. Is that true? And if he says, yeah, say, I don't see marriage that way. I don't see that that's my role, is to hop to it as if I'm your servant on call. I see I'm your partner. We might have a disagreement about how we view marriage, right? And so stay calm, put it out there, and maybe that might invite him to think like, well, I never heard of that. That's how my dad did it. And maybe his dad did do it that way. Maybe that's the teaching he got in church. And by you being strong enough and kind enough to say, I don't see it that way, that might pique his curiosity to like, wow, you're right. I never thought about it that way, right? So if he's not at heart interested in being the oppressor. He really wants to have a good marriage, but this is his picture of marriage that he grew up with, just like our picture of marriage sometimes is distorted. Maybe by you standing up in a kind way and saying, I don't think that's what God designed marriage to be, is for you to be the owner and me to be the slave, or for you to be the parent and me to be the child. I don't see that leading to any kind of good sex life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And see what he says. You might be someone, as you get strong enough to be kind, loving, and firm with your boundaries, to open his eyes. And I will tell you, ladies, and I mean this with all of my heart, I'm not saying this as a PR. I haven't had very many men, but in the 40 years I've been doing this, I have had more than a handful of men that have either written me or come up to me in weird places where I'm speaking, or even in a bookstore. Are you Leslie Vernick? I'm like, I don't know. It depends. Like, why are you asking me? Like, are you going to hurt me or what?
Yeah.
And they will say,
Not funny.
you saved my marriage.
Yeah.
How? By helping my wife get strong enough to not put up with my crap anymore. Not in the belligerent, I'm going to pay you back for being a jerk kind of way, but for you to get healthy. When you get when you see a friend who's healthy, when you see a friend who's exercising and lost weight, you're curious, like, well, how'd you do that? Right? Maybe if you get healthy enough not to put up with the crap and not give it back either, that might just make someone who's unhealthy but not toxic or narcissistic, they're not going to change, but just someone who's just learned bad things might say, what's gotten into you? I'd like some of that too. How might I learn to be? And Jen, you have a story about that. Tell a little bit of that.
Well, I mean, I know my personal story is that I decided to shift after I found out my husband was a sex addict and he chose to get into recovery. Like you said earlier, I chose not to have any choice but to heal myself, right? So I did all of that, but with that came so many growth opportunities. And with that I went from nursing to coaching. I did my own healing work. I did all the things that I needed to do. And then I got into coaching to help other women in situations like this. And I think it's important to know as well, like with everything that you're saying, that we need to, look for opportunities for growth. Like, it's not just who's to blame, what's my responsibility, but then just if I can plant some seeds, and I know that's not why we're here tonight, but just plant some seeds as to where you go in the future. What is God calling you to be? Because that's what we're really here about. We really want you to, we want to see you grow and develop and nurture yourself and maybe possibly others. So yeah, my story was kind of like that a little bit in a nutshell, but yeah, I've come a long way, very much a long way.
Yeah. Amanda's asking, what do you do if you feel like it's impossible to stay well, but you're too scared to leave because of the safety of your child?
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, that comes down to values. So I really encourage you to look at what your values are. There's lots of online help or one-on-one coaching or counseling that you can get to really do a deep dive, because what I'm hearing there is this is more important right now than that. And that doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just jockeying for first position. So right now, this is really important. This is what God is downloading onto me, is what I need to do. So while I'm doing this, like what Leslie's workshop is going to teach us, and what Leslie's teachings all around help us do, is, ask that question, how do I stay well, or how do I leave well? And I think those values will really come into play.
Yeah. And I think while you're staying well, let's say you have a 2-year-old and you don't feel that your husband is capable, maybe he's a drug addict or all of those kind of things, that if he got 50 custody, or, if he's just irresponsible, he would not take care of your child well, and you feel fearful for her safety or the child's safety. I get that. There's plenty of good reasons to believe that for some of you, but that doesn't mean that you just wait and you just sit there. So your child, let me just say this. When you're in a toxic relationship, it takes its toll on you. And the longer you're in it, the worse you get. We have many women in our Conquer membership who have stayed like were told to, sacrifice, suffer, be the, cross to bear, and all the things that they have learned. And they're 30 years in, and now they can't leave because they're so sick. They have so many autoimmune deficiency diseases and so much toxicity in their body from trying to hold back their emotions and from the trauma that they've been in, that they can't work, they can't get health insurance. Now they can't leave. And now they're truly stuck. And so we don't want that to happen to you. And we'll talk a little bit about the health effects of living in a toxic relationship. The Bible says it's like rottenness to your bones, and it can really destroy your health. So what I'm going to say to you, Amanda, is your child, I see that you have a lot of care for your child. Your child needs at least one healthy parent.
Amen.
If your husband is continuing his toxic ways and refuses to get healthy, staying unhealthy in an unhealthy home for the sake of your child is craziness, because your child needs one healthy parent. So your job right now isn't to fix your marriage, and it may not be to leave right now, but your job is to do everything you can to get strong and healthy and capable of leaving, so that when you can, you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's your job right now. And if by some miracle your husband changes and all that, well, you can revise that plan. But right now, your work is not to just sit there and wait, scared as a little bunny, waiting for the coyote to come and get him. Your job is to say, whoa, I've got a window of time to either get my education finished, train myself to work full time if I have to, get my mental health in order, get some counseling or get some coaching or get some support so that I can get strong to be a good role model as a woman of God for my daughter, because her dad's going to be who he is. So he's going to be hit, but she's going to see one healthy, godly person in her life, and it's going to be me. But I have to be strong enough and capable enough to be that for her. And I'm not that right now, because I've been micromanaged, I've been controlled, I've been living in fear, I've been living in lies. And so what do I need to do to get different? And those are the things that we can help you with.
Yeah, I love that. I thank you so much for sharing that, because I feel women become, I have even become a shrinking violet at times. And I think the whole coaching concept is, now what? So this is our story, and it's awful, and it's everything, and it's all the things. Now what is, what am I going to do next? And Leslie, you've taught us, the way you word it is, we can change the dance steps. So let's change the dance steps, because as soon as you change the dance steps, then they either trip over your feet, they fall down, or they get in line. And it's going to take a lot of bumbling. It's going to take a lot of practice, but it's going to change no matter what. If you change the dance steps, that whole dance is going to change.
And Amanda, you're saying I have a lot of stomach problems. I can't help but think that part of your stomach problems are because you're living in a very toxic environment.
Yeah.
Right. So you're kind of Peter, you solve Peter and it creates another problem. So I think it's really important for you to say, what do I need to do, Lord, to be a steward of my health? Because your daughter needs you. Your daughter needs one healthy parent, both physically healthy and emotionally healthy. And if living in that toxic environment is causing you to be more unhealthy physically, I think you have to really talk about that with someone and get some help to get strong enough to know what you need to do. Okay. So Jen, go to the next question. My dog is scratching at my door again.
I think I can hear it a little bit. Okay. So we've got another question here that says, how do we handle the backlash that comes when we set a healthy boundary? I love this question.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's really important that you understand that when you start, a healthy boundary is not on them. So you're not trying to control them, because that's being, just as abusive as they're trying to control you. So you don't set a boundary on them, you set a boundary on you. But if your boundary is, hey, I don't want to have sex with someone who treats me like dirt 98% of the day, I'm not going to have intimacy with you. When you do that, of course, there's going to be backlash. So what's the backlash? Are they not going to talk to you? Are they going to close the bank accounts? Are they going to verbally assault you? Are they going to guilt trip you? What are they going to do? What's your history of backlashing when you stand up for yourself?
Yeah.
And if it's something that's dangerous, then maybe you need to make a plan for that before you set the boundary, right? If it's, so the prudency, danger, and take refuge, they don't you be shrewd as serpent, gentle as dove. You're shrewd about when you say what and how you say it, so that you don't become more in danger if you have a boundary that is going to enrage someone.
Yeah.
Any thoughts about that, Jen?
Well, if I can just add, I mean, everything you just said is exactly what I was thinking. That's why I get really passionate about this. And okay, Leslie, correct me, but it's like a backhanded compliment, because when they stand up to you and they get upset that you're putting in a boundary, it means they notice something's changing. So as I just said, those dance steps are changing. They're starting to take notice.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's effective in the sense that we're not trying to control the other person, just like Leslie said, no. But it means I'm getting stronger and someone else is noticing, and keep it going. It's going to be hard. And that's where not only are you going to put in the boundary, but you need a support network, which is exactly what Conquer is all about. So you're going to start dipping your toe in, or you're going to go full in to setting some of these boundaries, because they're important to you and your values and protecting yourself. And then you need a support network that's really, really important to you to uphold you when they push back. Yeah. That's what we're all about.
And most of the time, the pushback is not dangerous. It's just manipulative.
Yeah.
Right.
It's so I just like it.
Yeah. I don't like what you're doing. And so they're going to try to make you feel guilty, or they're going to try to shame you. So this is where it's important for you to do your own work, so that you don't take responsibility for that. So this is the topic of so I'm going to give you a couple examples. Let's say that your husband drinks too much. And so he road rages, right? So you're going to set a boundary of, hey, I'm not going to drive in the car with him when he drinks, because now he's already intoxicated. He's driving crazy. And if someone cuts him off, we're in for a terrible ride. I'm not going to do that for myself anymore. Okay. So setting a boundary is not, you can't have any more drinks. That's not your decision to make. It's not, you can't drive, because that's not your decision to make, because he's going to drive if he wants to, right? So your decision is, hey, if I notice he's drinking, I'm not going to drive with him. So he's going to get mad. Like, wait a minute, I'm taking an Uber home. I'm not driving with you unless you give me the keys and let me drive, which is your choice, but I'm not driving with you. Now he's going to have some backlash on that. He's going to guilt trip you for spending the money on an Uber. He's going to try to convince you to trust him. You're being ridiculous. That's where you have to not be easily manipulated. Nope, I've made my decision. Or let's say he's having a conversation with you and he's verbally assaulting you, or he's talking over you. You can't get a word in edgewise, and you're about up to here. And a few choice words are about to go out of your mouth. Okay? And you know that. Your boundary is, hey, you know what? I just can't listen anymore. I can't talk anymore. I'm done. I've had enough. I'm going to the bathroom. I've got to go. Mm-hmm. You might not even say those words if you've already gotten backlash for that. You might just say, hey, I got to go potty. And you just leave. You leave the conversation. Yeah. And you get in the bathroom, you lock the door, you sit on the pot, and you just do your breathing exercises to calm yourself down. Mm-hmm. All right. And he might come back and say, hey, I'm not done. Get out of there. And you might say, I'm going to the bathroom. I'm not feeling well. I don't think I'm up for any more conversations. And now you've got yourself a door and a lock on it while you say that. And he may handle it. He may not handle it. Make sure you have your cell phone with you. And, if it gets worse, you can always call 911. But if he doesn't, he may come to accept, wow, when I start badgering her and belittling her, all of a sudden she's got to go to the bathroom. She's not talking to me anymore. That's not working. Right. And so you can have boundaries. You can say them softly. You don't have to be, my boundary is, don't say that. Just say, hey, I can't listen anymore. I'm too tired. Or I don't want to say the wrong thing right now. I've got to take a break. I've got to take care of me. You don't say those words, but I'm telling you, that's what you're doing. You're taking care of you so that you don't end up losing your freaking mind and acting like a crazy woman, which is what he's trying to make you do, so that he can call the police on you because you slapped him. Exactly. Or because you flipped out in front of the children. And now they're saying, Mom, Daddy says you're crazy and you're depressed and you need to go to the hospital. You don't want that to happen. Don't let yourself get to that place, because he will push you to get there.
On purpose.
On purpose.
Yep. It's intentional. I have to say, it may be subconscious. I'm not saying these guys sit up, at 3 a.m. and calculate how to do stuff, but it's intentional, subconscious, but intentional. This is their reaction to things, and they're going to poke and prod until they get you to react. And what we love about your hearts is that God has brought us to a place where we can, as we say, Leslie, notice, pause, and choose. And so, like Leslie was saying, you're going to notice something's going on. You're going to pause. You're going to go to the bathroom. You're going to breathe. You're going to call a friend. You're going to do something. And then you choose the next right response instead of reacting, throwing something, yelling back, hitting him, doing something that's going to provoke him and then not end so well for either one of you. Right. And I don't think that's what any of us want.
Right? You know, in the workshop, we're going to talk a little bit about when does the abuse look mutual? And this is a real tricky thing when you go into your pastor, when you go into a Christian counselor, and, you know, maybe he's being very controlling and he's being very oppressive and you're reacting to all that, but how you're doing that looks kind of like a mutual abusive situation, or maybe it actually looks more abusive because he's doing it more subtle and provoking you and you're doing it more obvious and reacting. And so be careful here, because this can be a setup for you to lose custody of your children, to have the police called on you. So I'm just encouraging you and warning you that the strategies here are very manipulative to make you look like the bad guy. And so I'm not saying resisting abuse or resisting power over you is a bad thing. And Jesus actually teaches us how to do it. But when we repay evil for evil, nobody wins. Nobody wins. Exactly. You stay unhealthy, he stays unhealthy, and your littles see how people handle their anger, and it's both wrong. And so how do we take care of ourselves? And let me just say one more thing. We all have limited capacity, all right? We only have so much before we are going to blow, right? So no matter how spiritual you are, no matter how, you know, together you are, no matter how healthy you are, we have limits. Like when you're too tired, you can stay up and stay up and stay up, but pretty soon, if you haven't taken care of yourself and gone to sleep, you're just going to fall asleep. Like even when you're driving, you're just going to conk out because you have limits to what you can do. And so just like when you were little and your mom trained you, or when your kids are little, you trained them to learn to hold their urine or hold your BM until you got to the toilet, right? That's part of maturing. We have to learn to manage our emotions so that we don't make a mess on ourselves or on other people, in the same way that you learn to hold your urine, but you don't have endless capacity, right? So if you were driving and you were aware that you had to go to the bathroom bad, you wouldn't just say, oh, I'll just keep driving. You would find a gas station and go. And if you couldn't find a gas station, you'd probably find a Woods or something, or a cup or something that you didn't mesh yourself in your car, because you have limited capacity. In the same way, when you're emotionally distraught, understand you've got to get to the bathroom because you have limited capacity and you're going to explode. And then you're going to have all kinds of icky to pick up. And you don't want to do that in front of your kids and in a place where you're going to get yourself accused of being abusive.
Well, that's amazing, Leslie. Are you okay if we wrap up and ask for everyone's biggest takeaways tonight? Because you've given us so much information and led us so far. So I'm wondering if we can.
I am, and we have another Facebook tomorrow. Do you have the topic? I don't have my.
I do.
So at 12 o'clock noon again, I'll be back with a different coach. Who's the coach going to be with me tomorrow? I take one episode at a time.
Doesn't say who's with you, but
Probably.
How do I have a relationship with someone who keeps lying to me?
Okay, so how do I have a relationship with a liar?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that.
So, I mean, this is all the themes, right? Like what we're talking about leading up to the workshop is really amazing, because it's just because he doesn't hit me, does it, you know, is it still abuse? Well, yeah, they're lying to me. They're blaming me. They're shifting the spotlight onto me when it's not mine to have. Right? So it's Susan. Sorry. Karen's just letting me know it's Susan by the looks of it. So Coach Susan. So it looks like I think Coach Susan will be here. Thank you, Karen. Wow, we've addressed so many things tonight. So if you can put into the chat what your biggest takeaway was from everything that Leslie had to share tonight,
And Jen, what was your biggest aha that God spoke to you in your heart? Like, this is
Yeah.
something I need to really pay attention to for you.
And if you're not safe to put it here, that's okay. Please write it down, because I think that's your takeaway moment. It's like, okay, I need to do something about this. This is your call to action.
Mm-hmm.
So your call to action really is to sign up for the workshop next week, because you're going to just gain so much more information and power. But right now it's like, whoa, what happened to me tonight that I like didn't even think of before, that I want to think about now, that I want to take action on. So please, please, please give that some consideration if you're not okay to put it into the chat. But we trust you'll do it, that you feel God's spirit. So what would you like to say in closing, Leslie?
Yeah, I just see some wonderful comments that love covers a multitude of sins, but not all sins. And I'm not to blame regardless of other people's words. Just because they say it doesn't make it true. Just because someone says it doesn't make it true. And this is where each of you are learning, hey, I have to think for myself. Just like when you watch Fox News or you watch CNN News, each of them have a completely different narrative of the same story, right? And you kind of have to say, which one am I going to believe? Or maybe neither one of them is telling me the whole truth, because they want to control the way I think so that I vote the way they want me to vote. Both of them do it. And so it's really hard to get the full truth. If you know that, then you're not as easily snookered, right? Then you can do your own research, or you can watch some other stations or read some more independent opinions on things instead of just believing that they're telling you the truth. And so when you know that, you can take better responsibility for yourself. And so I'm seeing some of the, how I can take responsibility, or I'm not responsible for how another person handles my no. Yeah, Christine, you're responsible for how you deliver your no, but you're not responsible for how they receive your no. Right? As you deliver it with truth and grace, they might say, wow, thanks for being so honest. Or they might say, oh, you're so selfish. You can't control. Just like you say no to your kids. You say, no, you can't have a cookie before lunch. And some of them say, okay, mom. And others steal the cookie. And another one says, you're a terrible mom. I hate you. Right? You can't control how they respond to your no.
It's so true. It's so true. But I think this is like, I love all the takeaways that we're seeing tonight. So the takeaways also lead us to where we can go. So sign up, look below as to, if you can't see it because you're listening to this on audio, it's leslievernick.com/join workshop. And we want to see you there next week, because this is very, very powerful stuff. So it's a sense of community like you will never experience. It's amazing. So you think you got a little taste of it here, just you wait. So
the workshop is amazing. We usually have hundreds of women show up, and it's really neat to experience the community of women from all over the world who are living with the same kind of person. It's like, oh my gosh, did they write a manual for men who do this? It's kind of weird that there's, and so you start to feel like, wow, I'm not crazy. Wow, I'm not alone. Wow, I'm not so stupid. All these beautiful women, all these intelligent women got stuck in a bad situation as well. There's nothing wrong with me. It's just that here I am, and God is inviting me. So this morning we talked about when truth is hard. God is inviting me to grow through this. It's not about what happened to me. It's about what's happening for me. And this very situation might be for you to learn to think for yourself, to learn to mature and grow into a fully functioning adult that can take care of yourself, so that you're not as easily bullied and intimidated by the fear of him leaving you, that you can learn to discern the truth from the lies spiritually, because there are people who will tell you stuff that just plain isn't in the Bible, but it sounds good. And even Jesus used the Bible to try to trick Jesus into doing what he wanted him to do. And people will use the Bible. And so I'm not even saying believe what I'm saying. Look for yourself. Go to Ezekiel 33. Read the Bible for yourself. I'll give you all the Bible references in the workshop. You can go look them up for yourself and see what it says, because you're responsible for you, your health, your mental health, your spiritual health. If you don't renew your mind with the truth, no one else is going to do that for you. If you don't guard your heart above all else, who's going to do that for you? If you don't take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ, no one else can do that for you. Those are your jobs to do, to steward your one precious life. for God's purposes and his glory, and not letting another human being rob you of that. So we will see you tomorrow, noon Eastern time, with Coach Susan, and we will be talking about, I can't even remember what we were talking about. It's been a long day for me. But,
no, I know it has. How can I have a relationship with someone who's lying to me? Yes, a liar, basically. How do I live with a liar?
So, yeah, and that's pretty hard to have any kind of relationship with someone you can't trust, right?
Yeah. So well done, everyone that was here tonight. Thank you for your contributions. Obviously, Leslie, thank you for everything that you always give.
Thank you.
You just are amazing as you keep giving and giving, and tomorrow it doesn't stop. So thank you, everyone. And keep the chat going, because even when we end this, there's a replay on Facebook. Remember, it's Leslie's public page, and you can continue the chat. Keep it going and talk to each other and find sisters that understand you. So keep it going after we're even done here tonight. So thanks again, Leslie. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen, our helper, for putting everything in the chat to help you. And we hope to see you tomorrow. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
Bye.